Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked the morning harvest. The golden wheat fields of New Terra stretched out before him, waving gently in the warm breeze. His 10-year-old daughter Lisa ran between the rows, chasing butterflies and laughing. It was a perfect morning on their colony world. "Dad, look at this one," Lisa called out, cupping her hands around a bright blue butterfly. "It's so pretty." Jake smiled and walked over to his daughter. "That's a Terra blue, sweetheart. They only come out when the weather is just right." He knelt down beside her as she carefully released the butterfly. "Your mother would have loved to see this." The peaceful moment shattered when the sky turned dark. Massive shadows blocked out the sun as enormous ships descended through the clouds. Jake had never seen anything like them. The vessels looked alive, with surfaces that pulsed and writhed like skin. Strange growths covered their hulls and they dripped some kind of thick green fluid. "Lisa, get behind me," Jake said, pulling his daughter close. His heart pounded as he watched the alien ships hover over their small farming community. Without warning, the ships opened. Not like normal cargo doors, but like massive wounds tearing apart. Things began falling from inside them. At first, Jake thought they were supplies or equipment. Then he saw them move. The creatures that hit the ground were unlike anything in nature. They looked like giant slugs, but with too many mouths filled with razor teeth. Their skin was transparent, showing the bones and organs of their victims dissolving inside them. They moved fast, faster than anything that size should be able to move. "Run, Lisa! Run to the house!" Jake shouted, pushing his daughter toward their home. But more of the creatures were already surrounding them. One of them turned toward Lisa, and Jake saw hunger in its black eyes. Jake grabbed a farming tool and swung it at the nearest creature. The metal blade passed right through its body without doing any damage. The thing just absorbed the tool and grew slightly larger. Then it reached for him with tentacles that sprouted from its sides. The pain was instant and terrible. Jake felt his skin burning as the creature's acid began dissolving him. But instead of dying quickly, he remained conscious as his body was slowly consumed. Through his agony, he could hear Lisa screaming his name. Across the galaxy, Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her warship, the HMS Vengeance. The communication officer's face was pale as he turned to her. "Admiral, we're receiving distress calls from 17 colonies. All of them report the same thing. Biological weapons, mass casualties. The creatures are consuming everything organic." Kate felt her blood turn cold. 17 colonies meant millions of people. "Show me the feeds." The main screen lit up with images from security cameras across the attacked worlds. Kate watched in horror as the slug-like creatures moved through cities, absorbing every living thing they touched. Plants withered and died. Animals fled in terror before being caught and dissolved. People ran screaming through streets that were already becoming empty wastelands. "What about our defense fleets?" Kate asked. "They're engaging now, Admiral. But conventional weapons aren't working. The creatures seem to absorb energy blasts and grow stronger. Projectile weapons pass right through them." Kate gripped the rail of her command platform. In 30 years of military service, she had never seen anything like this. The aliens weren't just trying to conquer human worlds. They were sterilizing them completely. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command. Priority Alpha." On the colony world of Havens Ridge, Commander Ryan Hayes watched his evacuation efforts fall apart. The creatures had surrounded the spaceport, cutting off the only escape route for thousands of civilians. His soldiers fired everything they had at the monsters, but nothing worked. "Sir, the creatures are adapting," Sergeant Brown reported. "Every weapon we use seems to make them stronger. They're learning from our attacks." Ryan saw a group of children trapped in a school bus as one of the massive creatures approached. He made a decision that would haunt him forever. He ordered his men to fall back, abandoning the civilians to save what forces they could. As his transport lifted off, Ryan transmitted a message to Earth on the emergency military channel. "This is Commander Hayes, Havens Ridge evacuation. The enemy has deployed biological weapons that violate every treaty in the galaxy. They want to play dirty. Request permission to take the gloves off." Back on Earth, President Maria Santos stood in the Situation Room surrounded by her military advisors. The reports kept coming in. Colony after colony was going dark. The casualty estimates were climbing into the millions. Madam President, General Paul Jackson said quietly, we need to discuss our options. General Jackson was the head of the Human Defense Initiative, Earth's most classified military program. He placed a sealed file on the table. The cover was marked with symbols that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. Project Pandora, he said. Everything we learned during the Earth Wars. Every weapon we agreed never to use again. Every tactic we banned because they were too effective. President Santos stared at the file. She knew what was inside. Weapons designed not just to kill, but to destroy the enemy's will to fight. Biological agents that could rewrite DNA. Chemical. Compounds that caused pain beyond human description. Psychological warfare techniques that could drive entire populations insane. The Earth Wars ended with the Treaty of Geneva because we scared ourselves. General Jackson continued. We created things that made us question whether we deserved to survive as a species. But now we're facing an enemy that shows no mercy to civilians. No respect for the basic rules of war. The room was silent except for the steady stream of casualty. Reports coming in from the colonies. President Santos thought about the millions of people who were dying while she hesitated. General, what exactly are you recommending? That we show them why we made those treaties in the first place. Why we learned to hold back. These aliens think they can terrorize us with biological weapons. They don't understand that we invented biological weapons. We just chose to stop using them. President Santos looked around the room at her advisors. She saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. The colonies were full of families like Jake Morrison and his daughter Lisa, children who deserved to grow up in peace. What about the galactic community? The other species will condemn us. Madam President, General Jackson said, they're already condemning us for being weak, for letting our colonies be slaughtered without proper response. Sometimes the only way to preserve civilization is to remember why we needed to become civilized. In the first place, the President opened the Pandora file and began reading. The first page contained a list of weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. The second page detailed psychological warfare techniques that could drive enemy populations to suicide. The third page described biological agents that could rewrite a species' genetic code in real time. How long would it take to deploy these weapons? Most of them are already manufactured and stored in secure facilities. We could begin deployment within 72 hours. The research teams are still active, just reassigned to other projects. Dr. Ellen Pierce is still alive and available for consultation. President Santos closed the file and looked at the tactical display showing the alien invasion. Red markers indicated colonies under attack. Black markers showed colonies that had gone completely silent. Gentlemen, ladies, she said finally, humanity has spent 3 centuries learning to be civilized. Today we remember why that was necessary. She signed the authorization order with a steady hand. Release the Pandora protocols. Show them what human warfare really looks like when we stop playing by their rules. As the order went out across Earth's military networks, ancient weapon systems began activating. Research facilities that had been dormant for generations came back online. Scientists who had spent decades trying to forget their most terrible discoveries were called back to service. The Zephyrian Empire had wanted to see what happened when they pushed humanity past the breaking point. They were about to find out that the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their capacity for violence. It was their capacity for learning from it. Dr. Ellen Pierce had been retired for 15 years, living quietly in her mountain cabin, trying to forget the weapons she had created during the Earth Wars. When the military transport landed on her property at dawn, she knew her peaceful days were over. Dr. Pierce, the young officer said as she stepped out of the aircraft. I'm Lieutenant Collins. The President needs you. Ellen looked at the official documents the officer handed her. Project Reaper was being reactivated. Her life's most terrible work was needed again. How bad is it, she asked. 17 colonies, millions dead. The aliens are using biological weapons that consume everything organic. Our conventional forces can't stop them. Ellen packed her research notes without another word. She had always known this day might come. The weapons she had designed were too effective to stay buried forever. 6 hours later, she stood in the underground laboratory complex beneath the Rocky Mountains. The facility had been sealed since the Treaty of Geneva, but everything was exactly as she had left it. Rows of sealed containers held her most dangerous creations, nanobots that could rewrite alien DNA, viruses that turned the body's healing processes into weapons, chemical compounds that could make an enemy's own biology betray them. Project Reaper is ready for deployment, she told General Jackson over the secure communication link. But you need to understand what you're unleashing. These nanobots don't just kill. They learn, they adapt. Once we release them, there's no calling them back. Doctor, what's the estimated time to clear the infected colonies? Ellen looked at her calculations. If the nanobots work as designed, the alien creatures will be eliminated within 48 hours. But there will be side effects. The nanobots will remain active in the environment for months, maybe years. Any alien organism that tries to invade those worlds will face immediate destruction. Deploy them. Meanwhile, Captain Luke Barnes prepared his stealth ship, the UES Shadowhawk, for humanity's first real counterattack. His crew had trained for this mission their entire careers, but they had never expected to use these particular weapons. Captain, the Grey Death canisters are loaded and ready, his weapons officer reported. Chief Martinez had worked with biological weapons during his training, but never anything like this. What exactly does this stuff do? Martinez asked. Barnes checked his orders one more time. It's a virus designed specifically for the alien biology we've observed. It infects their healing systems and makes them work in reverse. Instead of fixing damage, their bodies will start healing incorrectly. They'll grow extra organs in the wrong places. Their skin will try to seal over their breathing holes. Basically, their own healing abilities will kill them. The Shadowhawk moved silently through space toward the nearest Zephyrian forward base. The alien ships were still focused on their assault on human colonies, completely unaware that Earth had started fighting back. Deploy the canisters on my mark, Barnes ordered as they approached the alien fleet. 3, 2, 1, mark. The Grey Death spread through the alien ships like invisible fog. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the screaming started. The human crew listened to the alien communication channels as the virus took effect. The sounds coming through the speakers were unlike anything they had ever heard. Captain, Martinez said quietly. They're begging for help. Some of them are trying to perform surgery on themselves to stop the mutations. Barnes felt sick, but he remembered the images from the colonies, the children dissolved by the alien creatures, the families torn apart by monsters that showed no mercy. They made their choice when they deployed biological weapons against civilians, he said. Now they get to live with the consequences. On the colony world of Haven's Edge, civilian engineer Amy Foster had watched her neighbors die while the military evacuation failed. When the government forces retreated, leaving the civilians behind, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Amy worked for the Planetary Mining Corporation, maintaining the industrial equipment that carved minerals from asteroids. But she had always been creative with technology. While the alien creatures spread across her world, she spent 3 days converting the mining arrays into something completely different. "What exactly are you building?" asked Dr. White, one of the few other survivors hiding in the mining complex. "Molecular dissemblers," Amy replied, making final adjustments to the massive machines. "These devices were designed to break down rock at the atomic level. I've modified them to target the specific molecular structure of the alien creatures." That sounds incredibly dangerous. Amy looked out the window at the wasteland that used to be her home. The alien creatures had consumed every plant, every animal, every person they could find. The streets were empty except for the monsters hunting for anything they might have missed. "Not as dangerous as doing nothing," she said. When the first alien creature approached the mining facility, Amy activated her modified equipment. The result was immediate and horrifying. The creature didn't just die. It was torn apart at the molecular level, dissolved into its basic atoms while still alive and conscious. But Amy had made one additional modification. She had connected the dissembler arrays to the planetary communication network. Every time a creature was destroyed, its death screams were broadcast across all alien communication frequencies. Now every alien ship in the system can hear what we're doing to their monsters, she explained to Dr. White. Let them know that humans don't just fight back. We make it hurt. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker and his Marine unit had been assigned to study the alien creatures, to find weaknesses that could be exploited, but Parker had different ideas about how to conduct research. We're not just studying these things, he told his troops. We're going to catch them, take them apart, and build something worse to send back. Parker's Marines had always been specialists in unconventional warfare, but the Pandora protocols gave them access to resources they had never imagined. Genetic modification equipment, psychological conditioning drugs, experimental technologies that most people thought existed only in science fiction. Sir, we've successfully captured 3 of the creatures, Sergeant Davis reported. They're contained in the biosecure laboratory. Parker looked at the alien monsters through the reinforced glass. Even in captivity, they were trying to dissolve their way through the containment walls. Good. Now we're going to make them wish they had never evolved. Dr. Kim, begin the enhancement procedures. Dr. Kim had spent years studying alien biology for peaceful purposes. Now she was using that knowledge to create horrors that would make the enemy's weapons look gentle by comparison. We're going to modify these creatures to carry a payload designed specifically for alien nervous systems, she explained. When we release them back into enemy territory, they'll infect other aliens with a neural virus that causes permanent, agonizing pain. The infected aliens won't die, but they'll wish they could. Parker watched as his team began their work. His unit's new motto was painted on the laboratory wall. We don't just win wars. We make the enemy wish they'd never evolved. In the depths of space, the Zephyrian command ship received reports from across their invasion force. War Master Thekvar, read the communications with growing alarm. The humans have deployed some kind of nanoweapon, his science officer reported. Our forward bases are reporting total casualties. The creatures we sent to their colonies are being systematically destroyed. How are they doing it? Unknown, sir. But the weapons appear to be specifically designed to target our biology. It's as if they understood our entire genetic structure before we even made contact. Thekvar studied the tactical displays. Red markers showed where Zephyrian forces had been eliminated completely. The humans weren't just defending themselves, they were hunting down every alien presence in the affected systems. What about their communication intercepts? Sir, we're detecting some kind of psychological warfare campaign. The humans are broadcasting the death sounds of our bioweapons back to us on all frequencies. Some of our crews are requesting reassignment because the sounds are causing mental distress. Thekvar had commanded military operations across dozens of star systems. He had conquered primitive species and defeated advanced civilizations, but he had never encountered an enemy that seemed to understand warfare at such a fundamental level. Recall, all forces from the forward positions. We need to reassess our strategy. Sir, there's something else. Our intelligence division has intercepted human military communications. They have something called quantum disruption mines ready for deployment. What do those do? We don't know, sir. But the human communication mentioned creating pocket dimensions of reversed entropy and trapping enemy ships in bubbles where time flows backward and forward simultaneously. Thekvar felt something he had never experienced in combat, genuine fear. The humans weren't just fighting back with conventional weapons. They were using physics itself as a weapon. Send a message to the High Command. Tell them we may have underestimated this species. Back on Earth, Admiral Jack Cooper prepared humanity's first major fleet engagement since the invasion began. His ships carried weapons that had been theoretical concepts just days before. But human scientists had worked around the clock to make them reality. 6 months had passed since the Zephyrian Empire first attacked human colonies. What had started as an invasion had become something else entirely. The galaxy watched in horrified fascination as humanity demonstrated abilities that no one had suspected they possessed. Commander Lisa Rodriguez stood in the briefing room of the military research station orbiting Mars. Her team was unlike any other in human history. They called themselves combat philosophers, and their job was to study warfare not just as a military operation, but as an art form. The enemy expects us to fight like other species, Rodriguez explained to her newest team members. They expect anger, fear, desperation. What they don't expect is precision, clinical application of exactly the right amount of force to achieve exactly the result we want. Dr. Alan Moore, the team's chief psychologist, pulled up holographic displays showing alien communication intercepts. The Zephyrians are showing signs of severe psychological stress. Their military communications have become increasingly desperate. They're starting to question their own decisions. Good, Rodriguez said. Phase 2 is working. Now we implement Phase 3. Lieutenant Sarah Kim raised her hand. Ma'am, what exactly is Phase 3? Rodriguez smiled, but there was no warmth in her expression. We're going to teach them to be afraid of their own thoughts. Meanwhile, in the Zephyrian Imperial Palace, War Master Thekvar sat in an emergency council meeting with the other military commanders. The reports coming from the front lines were beyond their worst nightmares. Show them the footage from Battle Group 7, Thekvar ordered. The holographic display activated, showing the recent engagement near the Proxima system. Zephyrian bioships moved in perfect formation toward a small human fleet. Then something impossible happened. Human soldiers stepped out of their ships into the vacuum of space without protective suits. How are they surviving in space? Asked Admiral Kekstar. Enhanced biology, Thekvar replied grimly. They've modified themselves using our own biotechnology, combined with their engineering. They can survive in hard vacuum, regenerate from wounds that would kill most species, and they've been psychologically conditioned to find combat relaxing. The council watched as the human soldiers, led by Captain Troy Williams, tore through Zephyrian bioships with their bare hands. But the most disturbing part wasn't their physical abilities. It was their behavior. They moved with calm precision, like gardeners pruning plants rather than soldiers in a life-or-death battle. They're not angry, observed Science Master Veltar. Even while they're destroying our forces, they show no emotional response. It's like they're performing maintenance on broken equipment. That's because they are, Thekvar said. We've intercepted their communications. They refer to our military forces as malfunctioning systems that require correction. They don't see us as enemies. They see us as problems to be solved. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent message from the Intelligence Division. War Master, we've detected human ships approaching the Keth Prime system. Keth Prime was the Empire's primary industrial world, home to 60 billion Zephyrians and the manufacturing centers that supplied their entire military. If the humans destroyed it, the war would be over. Scramble all available fleets, Thekvar ordered. We cannot lose Keth Prime. But when the Zephyrian defense fleets arrived, they found something unexpected. The human ships weren't attacking the planet. They were just sitting in orbit, broadcasting on all frequencies. Dr. Sandra Lee worked in her laboratory aboard the human medical ship Hippocrates. She had spent her entire career studying alien biology, but always for peaceful purposes. The war had changed that. Now she was humanity's chief weapon designer in the field of biological warfare. The compassion virus is ready for deployment, she announced to Admiral Chris Turner over the communication link. But I need to warn you about what this will do. Explain, Doctor. Unlike our previous weapons, this virus doesn't cause physical harm. Instead, it rewrites the neural pathways responsible for empathy. Infected Zephyrians will become physically incapable of causing harm to any living creature. Admiral Turner considered this. That sounds almost humane. No, Admiral. It's much worse than killing them. The virus makes them experience the pain of every creature they've ever harmed, magnified 1,000 times. They'll collapse in paralyzed horror at their own past actions. Most of them will spend the rest of their lives in catatonic states, unable to function because they can't stop feeling the suffering they've caused. Turner was quiet for a long moment. Deploy it. On Keth Prime, the first Zephyrians began showing symptoms within hours. Factory workers stopped their machines and began weeping uncontrollably. Military personnel dropped their weapons and curled up in corners, unable to bear the weight of their memories. Government officials abandoned their posts to spend their time trying to heal injured animals in city parks. The planetary defense grid shut down as its operators became too overwhelmed with empathy to target the human ships. Within days, Keth Prime had transformed from a military-industrial complex into a world of 60 billion beings who could think of nothing but helping others. The galactic community reacted with panic. Ambassador Helen Carter of the Ethereal Collective, the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilization, requested an emergency meeting with human leadership. "What you're doing violates every principle of civilized warfare," Ambassador Carter told President Santos via quantum communication link. "Ambassador," Santos replied calmly, "we didn't start this war. We didn't choose to use biological weapons against civilian populations. We're simply adapting to the new rules that our enemies established. But your weapons are barbaric. The psychological effects alone are precisely calibrated to end this conflict with minimum loss of life," Santos interrupted. "We could have sterilized their worlds. We could have exterminated their entire species. Instead, we're teaching them empathy. How is that barbaric?" Ambassador Carter struggled to find words. The Ethereal Collective had existed for millions of years, and they had never encountered a species that fought wars by making their enemies more compassionate. "Other species are beginning to fear humanity," Carter said finally. "Good," Santos replied. "Maybe that will encourage them to think twice before attacking human colonies." Major Scott Davis defended Luna Base, Earth's primary military installation. His job was protecting the sealed vaults that contained humanity's most dangerous weapons, the ones they hadn't used yet. "Major, we're receiving requests from field commanders for access to the Omega-class weapons," his communications officer reported. Davis looked at the massive vault doors that hadn't been opened since the Earth Wars. Behind those doors were weapons that could crack planets, devices that could stop time, and things that could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas. "Tell them the answer is no. We're winning this war with restraint protocols. The real weapons stay locked up." "Sir, what if the enemy escalates further?" Davis considered this question. "Then we'll show them why we built those vaults in the first place. But until then, we stick to the gentle approach." Back in the Zephyrian command ship, Thekvar received the final reports from Keith Prime. The planet's entire population had become functionally pacifist. They were still alive, still healthy, but completely unable to contribute to the war effort. "How many worlds have we lost to this weapon?" he asked his aide. 14 so far, War Master. The humans deploy it and move on. They don't occupy our worlds or steal our resources. They just make our people incapable of fighting." Thekvar stared at the tactical display. Red markers showed Zephyrian worlds under human influence, but these weren't conquered territories. They were rehabilitation centers. "They're not trying to defeat us," he realized. "They're trying to fix us." The revelation was more terrifying than any weapon. The humans weren't fighting a war of conquest or revenge. They were performing surgery on an entire civilization, removing its capacity for violence with the precision of trained doctors. "Send a message to all remaining fleets," Thekvar ordered. "We need to understand what kind of species we're dealing with, and we need to do it before they decide we're beyond saving." As the order went out across the Zephyrian fleet, human ships continued their methodical advance through enemy territory. They moved with the patience of teachers and the precision of surgeons, transforming every world they touched. The galaxy was learning that when humans went to war, they didn't just seek victory. They sought to turn their enemies into friends, and that was far more dangerous than any weapon of mass destruction. The Zephyrian Empire made their final desperate decision in the council chambers of their homeworld. War Master Thekvar stood before the assembled leaders, holding a sealed container that glowed with sickly yellow light. "The Soul Plague," he announced grimly. "Our scientists have spent centuries perfecting it. This weapon doesn't just kill the body. It destroys the mind by forcing victims to experience every moment of suffering they have ever caused to others." Emperor Zexkar leaned forward on his throne. "And you believe this will stop the humans?" "It has to," Thekvar replied. "We've lost 43 worlds to their psychological weapons. Our people are being turned into pacifists. Our military forces refuse to fight. If we don't stop them now, our entire civilization will cease to exist as a warrior culture. The Emperor studied. The weapon. Deploy it on Earth itself. Let them feel the suffering they have caused our people. Let them understand what real horror feels like. 3 days later, Zephyrian stealth ships released the Soul Plague into Earth's atmosphere. The biological weapon spread across the planet, like invisible fog, designed to drive every human insane with guilt and empathy for their victims. Captain Julia Adams was on duty at the Earth Defense Command Center when the plague hit. She felt it immediately, a crushing weight of emotion as her mind was flooded with the experiences of every Zephyrian her weapons had harmed. She felt their fear, their pain, their desperation as they died or were transformed by human weapons. But, instead of driving her insane, the experience changed her in a different way. Adams stood up from her command station, tears streaming down her face, and walked to the communication panel. All units, this is Captain Adams. I need volunteers for special assignment. Anyone willing to feel what our enemies feel? Within hours, thousands of humans had volunteered. Dr. Patricia Moore, Earth's leading expert on neural psychology, studied the volunteers as they were deliberately exposed to the Soul Plague. "This is incredible," she reported to General Nick Foster. "The weapon is working exactly as designed. Our people are experiencing perfect empathy with their victims, but instead of breaking them, it's making them better soldiers." "How is that possible?" Foster asked. "Because now they understand exactly how much their enemies are suffering. They can calibrate their responses with perfect precision. Instead of using maximum force, they're using exactly enough force to achieve their goals while minimizing unnecessary pain." Foster watched through the observation window as Captain Adams briefed her new team. The Soul Plague had given them all the ability to feel their enemies' emotions in real time. "We know now what fear feels like to them," Adams explained to her volunteers. "We know what pain means to their species. We can use this knowledge to end conflicts faster and with less suffering on both sides." Dr. Rachel Green led the first Restoration Corps mission to the Zephyrian world of Veltar. The planet had been strip-mined by the Empire for military resources, leaving it a barren wasteland, but Green's team had orders that seemed impossible to fulfill. "We're not here to conquer this world," she told her team as their ships entered orbit. "We're here to make it better than it ever was." The Restoration Corps was humanity's newest military unit, but they carried tools of creation rather than destruction. Advanced terraforming equipment, genetic reconstruction devices, technology that could bring extinct species back to life and reshape entire ecosystems. "Begin atmospheric processing," Green ordered. "I want to see forests where there used to be mines. I want to see oceans where there used to be industrial complexes." The Zephyrian survivors on Veltar watched in confusion as human ships began transforming their dead world. Machines descended from orbit and started growing trees where nothing had lived for decades. The poisoned soil was cleansed and replanted with flowers that had been extinct for generations. "Why are they doing this?" asked civilian leader Mordan as he watched a human engineer restore the ancient lake that had been drained for mining. Operations Dr. Green overheard the question and approached the Zephyrian leader. "Because we can," she said simply. "Because we have the power to destroy, which means we also have the power to create. And creation is more interesting than destruction." Within weeks, Veltar had become more beautiful than it had ever been in recorded history. The humans didn't just restore what had been lost, they improved everything. The new forests were more resilient to disease. The reconstructed animals were free from genetic defects that had plagued them for millennia. The restored oceans teemed with life forms that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. The psychological impact on the Zephyrian Empire was devastating. Admiral Kextar sent desperate reports to High Command. "They're not punishing us," he transmitted, from his flagship. "They're showing us what we could have been. Every world they touch becomes a paradise. Our people are abandoning military service to work with human restoration teams." The message was intercepted by Admiral Karen Bell, commander of Humanity's Kindness Campaign. She had been a warrior her entire life, but the soul plague had changed her perspective. Now she understood that the most effective way to defeat an enemy was to remove their motivation for fighting. Deploy the care packages, she ordered her fleet. Every Zephyrian world gets food, medicine, and entertainment broadcasts. Show them what peace looks like. Human ships began arriving at Zephyrian worlds not with weapons, but with gifts. Medical supplies that could cure diseases the aliens had suffered from for generations. Food that was more nutritious and delicious than anything in their own cuisine. Entertainment programs that showed human families living in harmony. They're making us ashamed of who we are, Zephyrian Science Master Veltar reported to the High Command. Our people see what humans have built, and they question why we chose to be conquerors instead of creators. War Master Thekvar stood in his command center, watching tactical displays that showed the systematic collapse of his empire's will to fight. But it wasn't military defeat. It was transformation. Request a meeting with human leadership, he ordered his communications officer. Not to negotiate surrender, I need to understand something. 2 days later, Thekvar found himself aboard a human diplomatic vessel, sitting across from President Santos in a room that was designed to be welcoming rather than intimidating. The furniture was comfortable. The walls showed images of Earth's gardens and cities. There were no weapons visible anywhere. You wanted to understand something, Santos said, offering the alien leader a cup of tea that had been specially prepared to be safe for Zephyrian biology. What kind of species weaponizes love? Thekvar asked, genuine confusion in his voice. Santos considered the question carefully. The kind that learned the hard way that love is more powerful than hate. We fought wars on our own world that nearly destroyed us. We created weapons that scared us into making peace with ourselves. When you attacked our colonies, you forced us to remember those lessons. But your weapons are more terrible than anything we imagined. You don't just defeat your enemies. You transform them into versions of yourselves. No, Santos corrected gently. We help them become the best versions of themselves. The Zephyrians living on the worlds we've restored aren't becoming human. They're becoming what your species could be if you chose cooperation over conquest. Thekvar looked out the viewport at a human colony ship. Instead of military vessels, it carried families of settlers who were moving to a former Zephyrian world to help with the restoration efforts. We studied your military history before we attacked, he said. We thought we understood human warfare, but we were completely wrong. What did you think you understood? We thought humans were violent because they had evolved on a dangerous world. We thought you would fight like cornered animals, desperate and brutal. We never imagined you would fight like teachers. Santos smiled sadly. The most dangerous thing about humans isn't our capacity for violence. It's our capacity for learning from violence. Every war we fight teaches us better ways to end the next one. And what have you learned from this war? That the best way to defeat an enemy is to help them become a friend. That the strongest weapons are the ones that create, rather than destroy. That true victory means everyone wins. Thekvar felt something he had never experienced in his long military career. He felt hope, not for victory but for redemption. If I were to formally surrender the Empire's forces, he said slowly, what would happen to my people? The same thing that's already happening. We would help you rebuild. We would share our technology and our knowledge. We would show you what your civilization could become if you chose to create instead of conquer. And in return, you would help us do the same for the next species that chooses war over peace. You would help us teach the galaxy that there are better ways to resolve conflicts. Thekvar looked at his hands, remembering all the orders he had, given all the worlds he had conquered, all the suffering he had caused. The soul plague was still active in his system, making him feel every moment of pain his victims had experienced. I don't deserve redemption, he said quietly. That's exactly why you deserve it, Santos replied. Anyone who understands the weight of their actions is capable of choosing better actions in the future. The war was ending, but not with surrender. It was ending with transformation. 1 year after the formal end of the war, former War Master Thekvar stood in a laboratory that would have been unimaginable during the conflict. He worked alongside Dr. Patricia Moore, developing medical treatments that could extend lifespans for dozens of different species across the galaxy. The neural regeneration compound is ready for testing, Tekvar announced, his voice filled with excitement rather than the cold military tone he had once used. If our calculations are correct, this treatment could add centuries to the average ethereal lifespan. Dr. Moore looked up from her research station and smiled. Tekvar, 6 months ago, you were trying to destroy human colonies. Now you're trying to help people live longer. How does that feel? The former alien commander considered the question seriously. It feels like waking up from a nightmare and discovering that the real world is better than any dream I could have imagined. The laboratory was located on New Terra, the same world where Jake Morrison had once farmed wheat before the alien invasion. But now the planet was something entirely different. Human and Zephyrian families lived side by side, sharing technology and knowledge that benefited everyone. Jake Morrison himself had returned to New Terra, but not as a farmer. He now served as the planetary coordinator for the Life Restoration Project, working with former Zephyrian bioengineers to develop agricultural techniques that could feed entire star systems. "Dad, look what we discovered today," his daughter, Lisa, called out as she ran across the research fields. She was now 17, tall and confident, working as an apprentice to the joint Human-Zephyrian Biological Research Team. "What did you find, sweetheart?" Jake asked, setting down his administrative tablet to give her his full attention. "We figured out how to make plants that can grow in any soil, under any star, in any climate. We can end hunger across the galaxy." Jake hugged his daughter, remembering the terrified 10-year-old who had hidden behind him when the alien ships first arrived. "Your mother would be so proud of who you've become." Captain Alan White prepared for the final official mission of the war. His ship carried cargo that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Complete technical specifications for every weapon humanity had developed during the conflict. "Are you sure about this, Captain?" his security officer asked as they approached the Galactic Council headquarters. "These files contain our most advanced military technology." "That's exactly why we're sharing them," White replied. "The best way to prevent future wars is to make sure everyone understands what modern warfare actually looks like." The presentation to the Galactic Council was unlike anything in their recorded history. Captain White stood before representatives of hundreds of species, calmly explaining weapons that could rewrite physics, reshape biology, and transform the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. "These are the tools we built to defend ourselves," he told the assembled delegates. "We're sharing them so you never have to face what we're capable of creating if truly threatened." Ambassador Carter of the Ethereal Collective raised a tentacle. "Captain White, some of these weapons seem designed to cause suffering rather than achieve military objectives." "You're correct," White acknowledged, "and that's exactly why we're sharing the complete files, including our psychological analysis of why those weapons are counterproductive. Every weapon we've developed comes with extensive documentation explaining when it should never be used." The council chambers fell silent as the implications became clear. Humanity wasn't just sharing their military technology, they were sharing their moral reasoning about warfare itself. "We want every species in the galaxy to understand that the most effective weapons are the ones you choose not to use," White continued. "True strength comes from having the power to destroy and choosing instead to create." Commander Beth Turner worked in what had once been a Zephyrian military academy, now transformed into a rehabilitation center for former enemy soldiers. Her job was helping alien warriors adapt to peacetime by giving them purpose in reconstruction efforts. "I don't understand how to live without war," admitted former Zephyrian Captain Morlek during one of their counseling sessions. "My entire life was built around conquest and victory," Beth nodded sympathetically. "I felt the same way when the fighting ended. But then I realized that building something is harder than destroying it. It requires more skill, more creativity, more courage." She led Morlek to the observation deck, where they could see the ongoing restoration of the planet below. Former military engineers from both species worked together, rebuilding cities that were more beautiful and functional than anything that had existed before the war. "Every building we construct down there is a victory," Beth explained. Every life we improve is a conquest. Every problem we solve is a battle won. The war didn't end. We just found better enemies to fight. What enemies? Disease, hunger, loneliness, ignorance, fear. These are opponents worth defeating. Admiral Kate Sullivan, now head of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force, sat in her office reviewing reports from across known space. The transformation had spread far beyond the original conflict zone. Species that had been enemies for millennia were suddenly finding ways to cooperate. "Admiral, we're receiving a request from the Rigel Confederation," her aide reported. "They want human advisors to help resolve their border dispute with the Centauri Alliance." "What kind of help are they requesting?" Sullivan asked. "They want us to teach them how to turn their enemies into allies like we did with the Zephyrians." Sullivan smiled and approved the mission. Humanity's greatest victory wasn't winning the war. It was making war itself obsolete as a means of solving problems. Her communication panel chimed with an incoming message from Earth Command. "Admiral, we're establishing a new military academy. The curriculum will focus on conflict resolution, reconstruction techniques, and advanced empathy training. We want you to serve as the first commandant." "What will we call it?" Sullivan asked. "The Institute for Applied Compassion." On the former Zephyrian homeworld, now renamed Harmony, a remarkable ceremony took place. Emperor Zexkar, who had once ordered the use of biological weapons against human civilians, formally dedicated the planet's resources to galactic humanitarian efforts. "Today we choose to be remembered not for the wars we started, but for the peace we helped build," he announced to a crowd that included humans, Zephyrians, and representatives from dozens of other species. Dr. Sandra Lee, who had developed the compassion virus, now used her expertise to create medical treatments that could heal psychological trauma across multiple species. Her latest project was helping war veterans from both sides overcome the memories of violence. "The same technology we used to force empathy during the war can now be used to help people process trauma in healthy ways," she explained to a gathering of medical professionals. "Every weapon can be turned into a tool for healing if you understand its true purpose." The Galaxy Military Academy established a new required course for all students, simply titled, "What Humans Do When They Stop Holding Back, a Study in Applied Compassion." The curriculum became the most popular class in the Academy's history. Students learned that humans were dangerous not because they were more violent than other species, but because they were better at violence and wise enough to use that skill in service of peace. The case study showed how humanity had escalated from conventional warfare to psychological transformation to ultimate victory through kindness. Professor Amy Foster, the former mining engineer who had built molecular dissemblers during the war, now taught the course. Her opening lecture always began the same way. "The most terrifying thing about humans isn't what they're willing to do to their enemies. It's what they're willing to do for them." Jake Morrison stood in his garden on New Terra, watching the sunset, with his daughter Lisa and their Zephyrian neighbors. The alien families had children who played with human children, creating a generation that would grow up thinking cooperation between species was normal. "Dad," Lisa said quietly, "do you think there will ever be another war like the one we lived through?" Jake considered the question, watching human and alien children chase fireflies together in the gathering dusk. "I don't think so, sweetheart. We taught the galaxy something important. We showed them that the strongest species isn't the one that can cause the most destruction. It's the one that can create the most beauty." Admiral Sullivan's final log entry, now preserved in the Galactic Archives, read, "Today, I realized what makes humans truly dangerous. It's not our weapons or our tactics. It's our absolute refusal to accept that anyone is beyond redemption. We don't just win wars. We transform them into opportunities for everyone to become better than they were before." The war had ended, not with conquest, but with evolution. Humanity had shown the galaxy that the ultimate victory was when former enemies chose to become friends, and that the greatest weapon was the wisdom to know when to put all weapons away. In classrooms across 1,000 worlds, children of dozens of species learned the same lesson. The most powerful force in the universe wasn't destruction, or creation, but transformation. And no species was better at transformation than the humans who had learned to weaponize love itself.